One final time for the India tour of Australia. 11-5 was where Australia won the series. The ODIs 2-1. The test match was a draw, and the T20 Australia won 2-0. Not so great when it looks like from the scorelines for India, but they did pretty well, taking Australia to close games but couldn't finish on a high. I'm joined by Ananya Upendran, where we review the T20I series. Ananya, your first thoughts 2-0 doesn't look like something in India's favor when it comes to the T20s, but they really did well in the first game with the bat and the second game with the ball.
I think, look, the series as a whole, the multi-format series, and the T20I series as well, feels like a series of what could have been for India if the one percenters went their way, if they had taken a chance, if they had fielded a little better, if they had probably been a little tactically more aware. Just those one percenters. I think it feels like a series of what could have been. I don't think 11-5 quite reflects the way that India played, but because they really pushed Australia through the series, whether it was in the T20s, whether it was in the tests or the ODIs, they really gave this Australian side a run for their money. And it feels like a series of what could have been 2-0 in the T20Is. I think going into the series, you probably expected India to bat a lot better than they did through the series. But again, the bowlers stepping up, not a surprise, but I think what was a surprise was that it was the seamers and not the spinners who were leading the charge. So I think a lot of positives to take away for India, but again, that much vaunted Australian depth coming to the fore.
Much wanted Australian depth coming to the floor, but there was a huge positive for India. That number 3 spot, which has been haunting India for a while now, looks to be stamped with Jemima Rodriguez's name. She made a huge comeback, 49 not out in the first game, played well in the second as well as the third. Couldn't score that big, but yes, is that a comeback of the makings, and did the 100 make a lot of difference for that?
Well, I mean, Jemima herself said that if not for the 100, she probably wouldn't have made this tour, and that's a fair enough call. I think after the series that she had against England and the disappointments of that South Africa series as well, I think there were questions around, whether she should be given more time in the domestic circuit just to build up some confidence, make some runs, and then come back, because I don't think anyone's ever doubted her talent. It's always been about turning that potential into performance, and maybe she just lacked a bit of confidence. But that stint in the 100 obviously turned things around for her, just giving her the freedom to go out and play the way she wanted in an environment where she felt supported, where she felt like the team really needed her to step up. And she came in the T20I series after spending a lot of time on the bench and really took her chance. I think it was something that she said she'd been waiting to do. Sitting on the sidelines is very frustrating for any player, but I think for her to have come in, and I think what was, for me as a viewer, was very nice to see, was that she didn't look like she was putting too much pressure on herself to do well. It just looked like she was playing the way that we saw her play back in 2018, where she just went out and kind of expressed herself. So, you'd hope that India kind of give her a long rope now, seal that number 3 position, at least until the 2023 World Cup, T20 World Cup, because, you need a bit of stability there. You need to know that you need to give the player at that position a bit of a long rope and say, hey, we're going to stick with you. You are going to be our number 1 player in that position. So I hope that India stick with her, because she's made an emphatic comeback, and she really deserves a long run because she's a quality player.
Emphatic comeback, right from an underconfident Jemima in that England tour to a confident Jemima is what we saw. All courtesy to the 100, she says. But as well, we saw another return, and this return had already a player of the series named to it. Thalia Magra made her return to the Australian side, over 250 runs, 4 wickets in that multi-format series. She literally closed it out in the T20I series as well. And as well as that pain for India. It's not moving anywhere away from Beth Mooney. This M factor, the M square, has literally taken away a lot of things from India.
Yeah, I know it all goes back to that second ODI, doesn't it? Where the two of them came together and pulled the rug from underneath India. I mean, they should have run away with the win in that game, and maybe the series would have turned out very differently. But for Talia McGrath to come into this T20I series, I mean, she was making her debut, and Lanning herself said, "Oh, I didn't know that you hadn't played a T20I. It's very surprising." But look, I think she was just excellent. Again, I said this through the tour that she looked like someone who knew exactly what she was doing. That time away from the team, just allowed her, I suppose, to develop more as a cricketer, as an all-rounder, work on her batting and bowling, and understand what her strengths are, and how she could be successful at the international level. And but also getting that taste of international cricket in 2016 meant that she knew exactly what it felt like to pull on those colors, kind of pushed her through those difficult times. So it was wonderful to see her come back. I think she again, another all-rounder in this Australian setup, another dynamic player. It feels like they keep churning out these players who can do everything. But it's great to see Talia McGrath come back, and I think her success in this series actually causes them a lot of headaches, good headaches maybe. But I mean, I think it could possibly put someone's position like an Elise Perry under a bit of pressure, at least in the T20 format, because we didn't see her bowl too much. I mean, she hasn't had that much success with the bat in recent times in the T20 format. So, how do they fit her in is going to be a question. But McGrath and Mooney, I think India will have nightmares about both of them. Mooney from the T20 World Cup has been haunting India. So, and they still haven't found a way to dismiss her early. So there will be a lot of questions there, hopefully, but a lot of learnings for India as well. And again, Australia just keep churning out match winners, it seems.
And then I said Mooney is already that pain, and India is not finding a way to get that answer to it. But at the same time, Talia McGrath comes in as a batter, as a bowler, as an all-rounder that Australia needs, and maybe Ellis Perry's position, maybe in doubt in the T20I setup. We're talking about all the positives. We have at least 4 positives, but at the same time, you may be thinking that why aren't we talking about the negative? The negative may just be wrapped up in that 5th point that I'm going to ask to Ananya. Another third thing, another positive for India, that pace contingent. When we went to Australia, we just had Julian Goswami. We didn't know that who's going to partner her in what setup, what's going to be the team composition, who are the pacers who are going to rule. Now we at least have 4 pacers who've put their stamp in different formats.
Yeah, again, like I said earlier, everyone knew, or India for the last while has been kind of reliant on the bowlers to get them out of difficult situations. It's usually been the spinners, but it was great to see that the pacers stood up on this tour, especially when there were a lot of questions around them, whether India do have the depth in the pace bowling department in the domestic circuit. Are we producing quality fast bowlers? And I feel like some of those questions have been answered. Of course, I wouldn't want to jump on the bandwagon and say this is the best ever Indian pace contingent. I think it's very, very early to say that. I think this is the first time the Australians had a look at several of those pacers. So you when you're unsure of what someone's throwing up at you, you're going to play them slightly circumspect. So it was great to see like Renuka Singh, Thakur, Meghna Singh, come up and really deliver the goods. But for me, the biggest win, I think, for India is Pooja Vastakar, and just the consistency she showed through the series. She didn't have the best start, but then from the second ODI, I think she consistently bowled very, very good lengths. She showed the ability to just be able to repeat that skill again and again. So that was a big positive, and I think her success will give India a lot of confidence and say, okay, fine, we have a third seamer in place. I don't think she's quite there as a frontline second seamer, but a third seamer there and we can then work around her and Julian Goswami and figure out whether we want Meghna Singh, whether we want Shikha Pandey, figure out horses for courses. But there are a good group of 5 or 6 seamers there that India can really work with. And there are plenty more in the domestic circuit. I'm going to keep saying this. There are a lot of really high quality pacers in India. It's just about giving them the opportunity. I think picking them at the right time, and they've done that really well with both Meghna Singh and Renuka Thakur.
Oh, okay, that's a lot of pacers, and at the same time we see Ananya is talking about that there's a huge depth when it comes to India's pace contingent if we just go to the domestics. But coming from the depth, Australia has a huge depth. They missed good number of their players, but still ended up winning the entire thing. So, what do you want to speak about that Australia's depth and how has that been churned out over the years?
I think how that has been turned out over the years, I think Harmanpreet Kaur kind of summed it up quite nicely in her post-match interview. I think it was after the second game where she spoke about how Talia McGrath had come into this side but had so much of experience under her belt playing, in the WBBL, playing T20 cricket in England, in the KSL. So just having these opportunities to develop outside just the domestic structure, just the WNCL. I think that's huge. It's played a big role in the development of a lot of these players. Just the opportunity to train alongside internationals, to learn from them, to pick their brains. So that's played a big role. I'm not going to say that the WBBL is the only reason that Australia are churning out these players. There are, of course, very good state systems. They're obviously contracted state players, so they're full-time professionals even at that level. But I think the WBBL has played a big role in just giving these players confidence to go out there in different situations. And Talia McGrath said this herself, that there were WBBL games that she's finished off or where she's batted in difficult situations and she's come out on top. So those experiences have allowed her to understand what she needs to do in situations when she comes across them in international cricket. And that's exactly, the case with all these Australian players. And for me, what the biggest thing, especially in this T20 series, was none of the big names in this Australian lineup got runs, aside from Beth Mooney. Beth Mooney always seems to get runs against India, but aside from Mooney, the Lannings, the Perrys, the Gardner didn't do much damage. So it was, again, those lesser known, it was the depth of that talent that got them those runs, whether it was McGrath, Wareham coming in and getting some important runs lower down, getting the wickets as well. I think Annabelle Sutherland bowled exceptionally well in that last game. So, it's just about game time, being exposed to different situations. And I think the WBBL has played a big role in that. And, it's just one of the big reasons that I think Australia keep going ahead, aside from having a professional state system.
You've answered, I think so, kind of my fifth question as well. You've taken that pointer up. There's a huge Australia depth because of the WBBL, because of the WNCL, the state contracts, and a lot of other things. And that is probably what India needs today at the moment. Harmanpreet Kaur mentioned after the second T20I that India needs a women IPL. India needs 40, 50 odd games a year so that they can start performing well on that international circuit. What is exactly that particular point, and you feel it's possible? Should we start with a 4-team or 6-team IPL?
I think, having been involved in the domestic system, I would say 8. But look, if you want to be conservative, then I think there are enough people to make up teams for a 6-team IPL. I think 4 is way too small. I think there are enough quality players to make up a 6-team IPL if you're not willing to go with an 8-team IPL at the start. And like Harman said, I think it's just the opportunity that you're not just playing 15 games in a year. Because right now, a lot of the state cricketers are, especially those who are playing only senior cricket, play like 15 to 16 games a year, train for like 10 months of the year to play for those 2 or 3 weeks. So it's a lot of training, very little game time. And I think one of the reasons, and Harman said this as well, is that when you know you're going to play more cricket, one, it motivates you to train, because why would you want to train 10 months of the year to play 3 weeks? It's not fair. But also it then exposes you to different conditions, different people involved. A lot of these players, and I remember speaking to Jemima in 2019 about her experiences playing that Women's T20 Challenge in 2018 and batting with Susie Bates, what that was like, what she learned from her. And she said that it was an eye opener, where she was telling me exactly what to do in different situations. She was able to read the game and say, this is what they're trying to do. Maybe you can target these areas. And for a young player to come up against, or to experience that and play alongside an international player, or just watch them train, there's so much you can learn from that. And again, like the WBBL, being exposed to different situations in matches, in competitive games. Pooja Vasakar has said this as well, that it's one thing to do what you do in practice, but then to actually go out there and execute it under pressure it's very, very different. And I think the WIPL is something that could change a lot. And I know a lot of people have spoken about the lack of depth in Indian cricket and all that. And I think and I've said this a lot, there's plenty of talent in Indian cricket. The issue is that domestic cricket for the women is not finishing school. So you won't get finished products in domestic cricket unless they are around like Sneha for 10, 12, 13 years plying their trade there. But
let me interrupt you. So I have a couple of questions to ask you here. First, a viewer is asking, South Africa, they don't have an IPL or a similar system, but they have done pretty well in the last 2 or 3 years. Do you feel that franchise league is important for the players to do well, or what has South Africa done differently for them to achieve the same level that we can even compare them to the likes of England, if not Australia?
Well, I think the thing with South Africa is that the exposure that many of the players have gotten in the WBBL. I think the number of players who've been involved in that year on year have consistently increased. And I remember the last tournament, I think, aside from the New Zealand replacement players, I think there were the most number of South Africans involved in that tournament. And, it's not just the Lizellis, Marizan Kaap, Dane van Niekerk. You also saw, before Sunil became a regular member of that South African side, she played for Brisbane Heat. You see now someone like Annika Bosch, who's still not a regular member of South Africa, getting into that league. Nadine de Klerk is part of it as well. So I think the exposure that they've gotten, and a number of players have gotten from these leagues is very, very important. They've been involved in England as well in the KSL. So it's not like, I know they don't have their own league, but the players have gone overseas and been exposed to these conditions, understood how the Australians train, understood how they play, how they approach different situations, and then taken that back into their, small system and probably spoken a lot about it in camps. And Dane van Niekerk has said this as well, that, we make sure that we're all aware of what direction we want this team to go in. We train exactly that way. And I think the other thing with South Africa, especially in the last couple of years, has been the number of training camps they have together. Even if they're short durations, they have a lot of them.
Yeah. The emerging.
Yes. So there is, South Africa may not have a league, but there is just so much more that they do around that. They have an A team and the emerging tour. How many other international teams send their A teams or their emerging teams outside to Bangladesh to play against Thailand, to play against Zimbabwe? There's so much they are doing outside that league. So if India don't want to start a WIPL, great. But then we have to build a pathway system, a very strong pathway system.
That is what Ramesh Pawar also said, that they are already identifying players for the next year's Under-19 inaugural World Cup. Hopefully that happens soon. Hopefully there's a pathway system available for India. At the same time, one more question related to this particular thing. You mentioned that the players have to do practices, work out for 10 months just to play those 10 or 12 odd games. Do you feel that it's a bit too much on the players, that for example, you're just playing for those 2 months, but you're actually training and practicing for 10 months. And suppose you have one bad season, you're just out of the reckoning, because if you have such a limited number of games, it's kind of very difficult on the players also to perform every time in those 10 or 12 games. I'll just give you examples. Like, for example, Veda Krishnamurthy. She's been dropped out of that India side, has only these 2 months to perform well. If she does well, there's some magic that's happening, then she gets a chance. If, for example, she may be a great player, but if she doesn't perform well, it's kind of a she's out for the next 12 months.
I mean, it is a lot of pressure to put on a player, especially someone who's in and around the fringes. The amount of pressure you put on yourself to go out and perform is sometimes, not everyone reacts well to that. Most people crumble under that much pressure. And a lot of these international players have said it as well, that when we do our best when we go out there and enjoy it, but how much, I mean, let's be realistic. Can you really enjoy it when you know that everything rides on those 8 or 10 matches? It's a lot of pressure to put on individuals, especially, in a country like India, where until recently, if you were 24 or 25, you were then also kind of out of the reckoning, unless you had an amazing season or scored like 600 runs. It was very, very difficult to kind of get into the system. So it is a lot of pressure to put on players, and having experienced it myself, I know it sometimes can be dilapidating, but you hope that the number of games increases, or you have to find a way to motivate yourself to train through those periods. And a lot of these, I mean, everyone in the domestic circuit, or everyone who's taking part in the domestic circuit, clearly is extremely motivated, because otherwise we wouldn't stick around to play when you're only getting to play, say, 10 or 12 matches a year.
Coming from the very important question about what Haman said, women's IPL. Okay, you don't want to start a women's IPL, need more 8 hours, there needs to be a pathway system. The domestic players need to be contracted so as to them being able to focus more 8 hours, more emerging tournaments. A better pathway system is what Indian team needs at the moment. There's one more thing before we sign off. That's what Ramesh Pawar said yesterday at the press conference, that they are seeing Smriti Mandhana, who's currently the vice captain, as the leader for the future. We've played with her, against her in the domestic circuit. What's your take on Smriti Mandhana, the leader?
I think she's a wonderful leader. I remember actually I played under her when, like, the first time she was given the captaincy. She hadn't led Maharashtra. It was back in 2014. She hadn't yet led Maharashtra, at least the senior team, and she was given charge of the India C team before India toured England for these practice games in Alur. And she was new to captaincy, but I think what helped her was it was a young group of players with her, a lot of whom hadn't, yet been around the system for a long time, hadn't been around the Indian team. So themselves were very, very nervous. We just had 3 or 4 very senior players. But, during that period, I remember, Smriti just made sure that everyone got together, ate together, talked to each other. She would always kind of go out of her way to make you feel like you were welcome. I remember she spoke to me a lot about what my plans were, what my fields would be. I think she's someone who is a wonderful, wonderful leader. And I think, through this time, since then, she's obviously become a wonderful leader of the game, which is extremely important. As a captain, to just be able to read the play, the exposure she's gotten in the WBBL, in the KSL, in the 100. She reads the game extremely well. She knows exactly what the bowlers are going to do. She's able to preempt a lot of those things. I think she will make a wonderful captain. She's also someone who sees the bigger picture, which is very, very important as a leader, to be able to see more than just what's in front of you, or more than just the next tournament. It's about seeing the bigger picture and seeing how this will like Virat Kohli talks a lot about, I want to leave the team in a better place. I want to make sure that we have a better future. I think, Smriti also thinks along those lines. And I'm sure, if whenever she's handed the captaincy, she'll make a great leader. And she's also someone who I don't think it will affect her batting at all. She's able to kind of separate those parts of her game. She's done that in domestic cricket. She did that in that series against England, I think it was in 2019. She batted extremely well. So when it ever comes to that, I'm sure she'll do a great job for India. And but there is a while to go. I think there's a World Cup before that, so we'll still have to wait and see what happens.
So just for everyone's information, we are not criticizing Mithali Raj or Harmanpreet Kaur, and we do not want them to lose their captaincies right now. It is just something that was discussed yesterday, and Ramesh Pawar mentioned that they are looking at Smriti Mandhana as a leader for the future. We don't know when it's going to happen. We're not saying anything against Mithali or Harman, just to be clear. But this is something just to be discussed for the future. I think so. We've covered a lot of pointers right from Rodrick's comeback.
And just if I can, I forgot
Please.
one thing. Another thing about Smriti that I think is very, very different from a lot of captains that I've played under, is that she's despite being a batter, she's a bowler's captain, and I think that comes from growing up in a era where batters go gung ho. I mean, it's all about white ball cricket. It's about scoring runs. It's about being aggressive. So because she's kind of grown up in this era where she knows batters are going to dominate you, one of the really positive things about her is that she understands bowlers are going to get hit. And that's something that's very, very important in a modern day captain. I think she doesn't allow that to pressure her, and she doesn't then transfer that pressure onto the bowlers. And I think as an Indian, that's something that's very, very positive, because you don't generally see that, even in a lot of younger captains now, because of the way we train and because of the way we're brought up. To see someone who's very aggressive like that is wonderful. And like you said, this is not a criticism of any of the other captains. They are wonderful leaders, but I think in the future, the way women's cricket is moving, you need someone who understands those different things about cricket and the direction it's moving.
A bowler's captain is what Ananya Upendran says about Smriti Mandhana, the leader. Maybe a future captain, we don't know. We've spoken a lot from Rodrick's comeback, Magra's show, India's pace contingent, Australia's depth, to what Harman asked for, a women's IPL or a better pathway system, or whatever we can call it. But it was a great tour that we had, India's tour of Australia. But at the same time, the Women's Big Bash League starts this Thursday. We'll have the preview, we'll have a weekly show both in English and in Hindi. 8 Indian players are participating in the Women's Big Bash League. That is the first time this big a contingent from India is playing. But that's it from the tour down under. We'll meet for the Women's Big Bash League definitely soon. Till then, that's me and Ananya from the Outside View Live.